Good afternoon, everybody. It's Gary Brown with TUG. I want to welcome you to the Path Guide webinar. Just so everybody knows, we're happy to have Path Guide back in our webinar series again. They've done a few webinars for us before. Path Guide has also been a TUG member and a sponsor at TUG Connects for the past 3 years, and you will see them in Orlando again if you're going to TUG Connect. Presentation today will be handled by Keith Lalonde from Path Guide, and Keith, it's all yours, so please take it away.
Hey, thank you very much, Gary. Thank you, Gloria, as well. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Some of you may have attended the Denver meeting, and if so, we're excited that you're joining us again. My name is Keith Lalonde. I am Vice President here at Path Guide Technologies. Our core product is our Latitude Warehouse Management System, or WMS. Latitude is a WMS. It's a best-of-breed bolt-on WMS. It actually interfaces to over 24 different ERPs, of which Infor SX.e is just one of those. For the next 3 hours, well, no, not really. How boring would that be? For about the next 35 minutes or so, I have the pleasure of speaking with you all about the do's and don'ts of implementing a WMS. Let me briefly just tell you a little bit about myself and my background. I've been with Path Guide a little over 20 years. I started as a software engineer. I helped develop and design the product, a number of modules and features that are in Latitude. I spent time leading the customer service team, the implementation team. I was responsible for formalizing the implementation process that we follow today. And personally, I've been involved in many successful implementations. These days, I spend the majority of my time working with the sales team, helping identify key requirements for new customers, new prospects, and so forth. I guess you could say after 20 years, I've done a lot, and they're still trying to find a place for me. I have been in many, many warehouses. It's got to be close to 500 or so. Now, there may be some people out there right now saying, I bet he's never seen anything as bad or as ugly as our warehouse. And what I would say to you is, actually, you're probably wrong on that. And as a side note, when this is all done, let's talk, because perhaps I can help you with you. At Path Guide, our only focus is warehousing and distribution. We've been doing so for over almost 30 years now. In fact, in just a few weeks, we'll be celebrating our 30th anniversary. All of this to say that myself and all of us at Path Guide, we have an appreciation for what it takes to be successful when it comes to implementing a WMS. We take great pride in that and great pride in helping people achieve success. All right, so what's the honest truth here? The honest truth is it isn't a cakewalk. Be careful, be suspicious of any vendor that tells you that this is a piece of cake, because it's a little bit more than that. It is straightforward. Like any complex project, there are things that you need to pay special attention to. Otherwise, you risk having a project that could go sideways, out of control. You might have a very bumpy road in front of you as a result, or worse yet, you can risk the success of a project. This is one of the first things we share with new prospects, and it's something that people want to have at the top of their list of things to be aware of. Some people may have already been down this road once or twice before. Sometimes, some people on the phone may just be kind of kicking the tires on the idea of a WMS. But know this, the improvements, the payback that an organization sees when they replace, manual processes or upgrade manual processes, replace obsolete WMS with a state-of-the-art WMS like Latitude, the payback is huge on that. Let's be clear, though. Changing the way that a company does business is usually a big deal, especially for those companies where they've done, certain things a certain way for a really long time, and more often than not, with little technology in place. All right, now that I've got your attention, is it all doom and gloom. I'm here to reassure people that absolutely not. It does not have to be that way. On the contrary, when people understand the types of things they should be doing, what they should be asking, what things they should be avoiding, people can be best prepared to avoid, the common mistakes, pitfalls that can cause an implementation to go south. Getting back to the idea that implementing the WMS is a pretty complex task, definitely you're not going to want to underestimate a project like this. Now, people may be hearing things like, hey, this sounds really, really, complicated. Well, it certainly can be. But if it's such a big deal and there's this whole risk of failure, why are people even doing this? That's a great question. Why change? Why are people investing in software in the warehouse, right? Companies are transforming the way they do business for a variety of reasons. But pretty much what they all have in common is that they need to fundamentally change. They need to shake things up to remain relevant, relevant against their competitors. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that people keep up with the Jones. I suppose in some ways I am saying that. But if anything, I'm actually, suggesting to people that they be the Joneses. Distribution is constantly changing. If you're not changing, you're not moving forward. If the competition's moving forward, then you're falling behind if you're not. What else? What are some other reasons? How about greater profitability? I mean, that's kind of a key thing. Margins continue to shrink, right? People may, find it a little shocking to know that, more and more companies are actually determining that the best way to improve the bottom line is to streamline warehouse operations. It is way easier to get more efficient in the warehouse than it is to increase margins. Often people find that when they implement a WMS, productivity can go up 20 to 25%, very common. Well, how hard is it to improve margins by 25%, right? That's pretty darn hard for sure. Greater profitability, comes by improving efficiencies in every area of the warehouse, or you should be looking at every area of the warehouse. When people automate, they end up, lowering, the cost per transaction to handle inventory and eliminating errors throughout that process. People get more work done, they're more accurate in shorter period of time. They receive it faster, they put it up faster, it never gets lost, right? And pick, pack, ship is faster and more accurate than ever before. A lot of people, you can blame the paradigm shift for, driving improvements in the warehouse. You can blame that on Amazon, right? But the truth is, these days, people want and expect that they're getting what they've ordered from you faster and more accurate than ever before, because that benchmark has been set, the bar has been raised. Advanced WMSs like Latitude, they bring visibility to areas of opportunity all throughout the warehouse. The net result is better labor management, better product placement. Some people might have heard of, slotting a warehouse. Whole idea of having the right item at the right place at the right time. Employee retention, right? Tough labor market out there for everybody, right? When a person goes in and they solve problems, and the workforce sees that technology is in solving problems, because that's how we're raised these days, people realize that their work is going to be noticed. People want to do a good job, and more importantly, they want to be recognized for their contributions. Well, when people don't have technology in place that makes it easy for them to do that and gives insight as to who's doing what, often a person's contributions are overlooked. The end result is, if the workforce is happier, they stick around more, and imagine if you did not have to worry about employee turnover. How great would that be? There's other customer requirements and demands. Those things are always changing. Wouldn't business be great if we didn't have to worry about customers? Gosh, how great would that be, right? How many people out there have heard that the only thing that remains constant is change. I mean, that's really true, and we see that in spades all over the place. Everything from customers putting special labeling requirements or packaging or shipping requirements. You know, the customer just drives it all. They continue to place more and more demands on distributors like yourselves, and rest assured that is going to continue. Sometimes the reasons can be odd why people choose those types of things. For example, one of our customers, electrical distributor located up in Canada in British Columbia, they had one of their larger customers come to them and tell them that they needed to invest in technology and build out their vendor-managed inventory offering because the perception was if they were not using technology to improve their operations, how could it possibly be that they themselves were servicing their customers the best or being able to offer them the best or most competitive pricing? And I mean, that we see that all over the place. You know, here's a question for people. At the end of the day, you know, why are you considering you know, implementing the WMS or changing? What are some other reasons for change? There's other factors that can drive this. Limited space. People are stocking more inventory. Buildings are getting more and more cramped. Many people are running at or over capacity. We have a customer of ours, a long-time customer. They've actually been with us through 2 different ERP changes. Fantastic. And at some point they found themselves absolutely cramped, no more space, and they were trying to add more value adds, more you know, building of assemblies and shipping out complete assemblies to job sites. That was going to be that is one of the value adds that they bring to their customers, and they were forced with a decision. They either had to you know, move out of their building, move into a new space. They had to build out, which really wasn't an option for them. And so what they did is they looked at and invested in technology to add very dense storage space. They added some vertical lifts, some high-density vertical lifts, and the outcome of that was they were able to free up 15,000 square feet of warehouse floor space so that they would have it available for more production, and reduce it down to something like 96 square feet was the footprint of two vertical lifts. What was really unexpected in that whole process is they reduced the labor and became 20% more efficient in the picking side of the business because they no longer had people, you know, walking through that 15,000 square foot area, and instead a person just kind of walks back and forth. One person walks back and forth between the 2 vertical lifts picking product. So, you know, what's important about this is that you know, technology continues to change. There are different reasons that people are investing in it. It might be, like my example, you know, vertical lifts. It could be people that are adding conveyors to move product around faster. We've all heard of robots out there. We have customers that voice pick. There's other reasons. What's really important about that is that third bullet there. If you're going to take the time and money to invest in something like this, in that process, make sure that you are, you know, selecting the WMS that can meet your current requirements today, and also be thinking about that future growth requirements. I mean, why would you want to go through this once and then turn around and go through it 24 months down the road, right? All right, so maybe some people are saying, fine, you've convinced me, we have to change, but change is scary, right? You know, are we going to be successful? Well, that's another great question. The great news is, yes, you will be successful. Many people have gone down this road before, so people should take comfort in knowing that people before them have successfully put manual processes behind, moved to WMS, and they've been exceptionally successful. One thing to note there, the advantages behind evaluating, looking at very closely best-of-breed solutions, those are going to be those bolt-on solutions like Latitude, is the appreciation that different businesses running on different ERPs, even different warehouses within the same organization, they each have their unique requirements. They each have their unique factors that determine how product needs to flow throughout a warehouse or a distribution center. And what's really important about that is it's the how tasks need to be performed that is really what makes that difference. And your best-of-breed providers are going to see that more often than an ERP that specializes on a very specific vertical that tends to have a more narrow focus. Again, that's a huge advantage with a best-of-breed provider like PathGuide that only focuses on warehousing and distribution. They typically bring to the table, the expertise to consistently transition folks to state-of-the-art to a state-of-the-art WMS with as little pain as possible, on time, on budget, step and repeat. Again, that's what companies like us do. As you kind of let that sink in for a second, my third bullet there, demand excellence. Again, going into a project like this, you really have to be looking for, expecting, and demanding that you want an excellent project, and the vendor needs to bring that to the table. All right, let's get on with some do's and don'ts, because that's probably why most of us are here. So, first thing, understand goals and objectives. I mean, why are you doing this? What problems are you trying to solve? In understanding what those goals and objectives are, write them down and revisit these as often as necessary to remind yourself why you're doing this. Because as this process moves forward, you're going to want to keep sight on this. Are you looking to eliminate errors? Are you looking to increase efficiency and accuracy? Are you doing it because you have to? Are you doing it because you're positioning yourself for future growth? Whatever that is, don't lose sight of that. Does everybody on your team, does everybody understand these goals and objectives? And that's critical. You've all got to be working in the same direction. We talked about other reasons that that people make change. Sometimes people don't know why they're going to change, and you learn as you go through this process. You learn more and more about it. At PathGuide, for example, early in the sales cycle, we do what's called a discovery. Now, we do that for a number of reasons. Clearly, we want to understand a person's goals and objectives. We want a real good baseline of where a company's at. Where do they want to go? And then, all too often a person doesn't know what they don't know, right? A person knows that they've got a couple challenges, but they might actually have other challenges that they don't even know exist, other roadblocks in the warehouse that simply adding a WMS isn't necessarily going to fix or isn't going to necessarily help ensure that a person, reaches their goals. Implementing a WMS should make everybody's life easier. I mean, again, that's just an expectation that you should have going into this. It'll be easier for people to perform their jobs. You're going to be able to eliminate barriers and just bring that visibility and that data that you need to make smarter day-to-day decisions to operate the business better. The end result is simply that you're making more informed decisions. Get buy-in across the organization. This is really critical. All too often, a common mistake is simply, one or two people, know that they need to do this, and if you don't spend the time to get, everybody on board across your organization that needs to be, that ought to be on board with this, the best intentions, don't necessarily, guarantee success, right? Include people that are going to be using the system into this process. Let them know what your goals are. Eliminating or letting them know that one of your goals is for, the guys out on the warehouse, letting them know that you want it to be easier for them to do their job. This is going to go really, really far. Now, when we talk about getting buy-in from key individuals, we're, at the high level, we're talking about, the director of operations, your VP of operations, CFOs, and so forth. But what about, warehouse managers? What about the team leaders? What about the warehouse crew themselves? What do they think they need in order to do their job better? If one of your goals is to eliminate errors, well, why do they think that they're making mistakes, right? I mean, we hear that in spades. Management knows that you make too many mistakes. You go to the warehouse manager, the warehouse team, they don't think they make hardly any mistakes. And then you ask the customer service team, and they say, you guys are both wrong. We make way more mistakes than what you even think we're doing. So, again, get everybody on the same page with this. Thoroughly vet your potential warehouse providers and their solutions that they are offering with. First thing that you need to know when you start talking with somebody, are you talking with an actual, vendor? Are you talking with a consultant? Are you talking with a reseller? Somebody who's just, reselling whatever, software, gives them the highest commission. That's not necessarily in your best interest to do that. If you're looking at a consultant, again, they may be, doing the same thing. That's one of the advantages that when you work with that best-of-breed provider, that's one of the things that, you're typically dealing with, the people that wrote it, sell it, support it, and keep it moving forward. There's pros and cons to both of those. Now, I have to tell you that you want to make sure that you ask and understand the recommendations that the vendors, many suppliers, carry, more than one. They might have their basic WMS and their middle tier and their advanced and stuff like this. At PathGuide, we have one, and it's configurable to meet various customers' requirements all the way up to the real advanced stuff. But if you're dealing with someone and they're choosing, we think you want our option A, well, why is that? Make sure that you really understand what that is. The reason that's really, really important, honestly, it's really, really rare when you have two warehouses, two businesses that function exactly the same. And, as you go through that process, be really, really wary of the, all too common one-size-fits-all attitude that some vendors bring to the table. It just, isn't that easy. So be aware of anyone who seems to kind of think that, everything's about the same. Typically, they have a lack of appreciation for what it really takes to be successful on a project of this scale. Too often that occurs when you're dealing with a vendor who doesn't live and breathe WMS. If that's the case, they might not understand, your diverse needs and the requirements that you need, or that your sector, like if you're specializing in electrical or industrial distribution, they might not necessarily understand that. Last bullet I have up here is, talking about a warehouse champion. Plan on designating, identifying, promoting somebody, whatever you want to call it, a warehouse champion. We thoroughly believe this. Now, this could be the warehouse manager. It could be, that first assistant out in the warehouse. But ultimately, this is a person who fully embraces all aspects of the project. Why are you doing it? What does the team need? Most importantly, how does the tool need to be used to achieve those goals? And they really become the resident expert in all of your process and the software solution itself. They have characteristics like believing that technology is a piece of the solution. So somebody who doesn't need no stinking computer to help them, do their job better, that might not necessarily be the best candidate. We can help determine that. Often when we get in, and I talked about doing on-site discoveries, and we're talking with people and seeing a day in the life and stuff like that. Often those people, we can see them right away and help bring visibility to that. These individuals, they tend to be organized. They have great follow-through, great communication skills. From a leadership perspective, they have the ability to inspire people around them. Again, a key aspect of this when you buy a system, people actually have to use it, right? If they don't use it or don't use it the way that it's intended, you're not going to see the benefits that you're looking for. At the end of the day, who's going to be responsible to make sure that people are using the system, following the processes and procedures that you've put in place, because they know those processes themselves inside and out, and most importantly, they understand what's going to happen if those processes are not followed. All right. What else? What else did you do? Expect the project to progress. Now, some people might be laughing at this. It's so obvious, right? Let me tell you, if you don't, when you start a project like this, once you get going, if you are not seeing major accomplishments, if the ball's not moving forward, things aren't advancing, if that type of stuff is not happening, at least every 30 days, something is not right. Whether that's completion of a business analysis, getting your training plan or schedule, setting of conversion and go live dates, things like that. Expect regular progress. If not, those things tend to draw out. And if you've ever heard about people often you hear it. If anybody's ever had a friend or known of somebody that's gone through like a SAP implementation, big hairy thing, right? Those things can go on for years. That really defeats the purpose, especially if you need to advance today so that you can remain, ahead of your competitors today. The last thing you want is something that drags on for years. Develop a plan, an implementation plan itself. Have a plan. Again, that is just so simple, but all too often people think they have a plan, but they haven't actually thought it out. They actually haven't, built into that plan recommendations from the vendor that they're engaged with. Some people, maybe they've heard, the phrase, failing to plan is the same thing as planning to fail. And I have to tell you that is true, right? If you don't do the work, the planning ahead of time, when it comes time to execute, you're really at risk. You're at risk of something falling through the cracks, something unforeseen, and by gosh, if you've gone down the path and you find that you're doing most of this stuff by yourself, that's a pretty big risk to take. Again, I mentioned it earlier, changing the way that you do business is usually a big deal, and when you change the warehouse, that's a big deal, especially when the people out there, all too often, they've done it the same way for 20 years or whatever it is. Again, the reward, the payback, yeah, it's big, but the surefire way to be unsuccessful is to skimp on the planning and preparation side. Know the plan. All right, great. You've put it together, or maybe your vendor and your people have come up with that. Let's make sure that everybody knows it inside and out. The better that you and your team understand how this is going to work, what those milestones look like, when they're supposed to happen, what happens if you don't meet them, the better that people understand that, the better off you'll be when the time comes to react to anything that's unforeseen, any obstacles that come up. I'll talk more about that shortly here, but know the plan. And then I have to laugh at this one, stick to the plan. Now, I'm really talking about by the time it comes to actually begin turning on and having people use the new system. And this one example comes to mind. Again, when you go through this project, depending on your organization and how many people you've got involved, sometimes you've only got the one or two people that are really driving this project and making sure that it gets implemented. But some of our larger customers have had entire teams dedicated to this. Somebody on the IT side, somebody for inbound, somebody for outbound, somebody for inventory control, and they've got their own departments for managing this. And so one particular implementation was just running along like clockwork, and all the time and energy that put into it, and the time came to go live. And when they went live, you always have your small hiccups. And at the end of the day, I think they were used to shipping out, I don't know, 400 orders a day, and they might have done 200, 250. It wasn't what they were used to. And so rather than focus on what obstacles that caused that, which happened to tie to inventory accuracy, I'd be happy to share that story more with people, but they didn't follow the suggestion of validating that that items that they believed were in certain bins actually were in some bins. So they had a lot of troubleshooting that they needed to do. But at the end of the day, they measured, and they were concerned that they didn't ship as many orders or lines as they're used to shipping on a Monday. And by gosh, they took it upon themselves to change their outbound processes for day 2. And so they marched in and they completely changed it up. And I won't bore you with that whole story, but in 3 days they changed the picking process 3 different times, until day 4 they finally said, what are we doing wrong? And what I told them was, we had spent all this time in developing the best process for them, and we recommended that they stay with that. Each day we recommended that they stay with it. On day 4, I said, you've spent all this time and energy, the process will work, you have to follow the process. And we went back to that, and by gosh, they, like I said, it was bumpy. They had to get a lot of inventory, consistency, issues corrected, but by gosh, they were they were successful. They were able to move past that, and the plan and the processes that they had put together, they really did work, and you want to have faith in that. All right, let's talk about some don'ts. What things shouldn't you do? Gosh, number 1, don't buy entirely on price. Imagine the following question. What if you ask somebody that has gone through this and implemented the WMS? What if you go up to them and you ask them, what is the best thing about your software? What's the best thing that you can tell me about it? Now they invested in for probably the same reason. They're trying to better their company. What's the best thing about that? If their answer is it was cheap, what is that saying, right? All too often, when people start their search, I hear it too many times. People focused on price. People say all WMSs are the same. Just tell me how much yours cost. That's the wrong mindset to go into something like this. Again, it goes back to the goals, what you're really trying to do, understanding that process, and then making the best investment for your organization. That whole idea of everybody's the same, and you want to go with the least option, all too often that's actually something that we find being spread and propagated by the ERP companies that have their own modules, or the cloud-based and the SaaS-based WMS offerings that are out there. They're just really selling on price and price alone. You just have to be really, really careful about that. You're usually sacrificing something very specific, and often that can bite you in the butt at the end of the day. Some things to think about. I mean, it's probably too obvious, but you typically get what you pay for. Again, we're talking about complex software solving complex material handling requirements. Those people that are looking at those SaaS-based offerings, gosh, they sure are attractive from a startup. They're typically cheap. They're generally the cheapest way to get started, and if you're not careful, you're going to find out that there's things that you didn't realize, that you're not necessarily getting what you're paying for. There's other problems to contend with on that SaaS-based size. It gets back to that one-size-fits-all, a lack of willingness to get any specific customizations that you may need. That's because in the SaaS-based offering, you're just one of however many people that are running on that software. So it's typically way more restrictive for what you can do. There's other things, but I will share a story. At the end of the day, we had a prospect. They're a medical distributor in Texas, and at the end of the day, they bought on price, and they ended up going with a SaaS-based cloud offering. So obviously, we didn't win the account, right? But at the end of the day, they were left by themselves to implement it. They had some manuals to go through and do their own training and things like that. And when things crashed and burned, the people that they bought from, they weren't really experts even in their own offering. So it was really tough for them to get too much help on that. They were on their own. The project ended up crashing and burning. Now they picked up the phone and they called us, and I would love to tell you that they turned around and they bought from us instead. And the sad result is no. They didn't buy from us, but what's even worse, they didn't buy from anybody. You see, they were so tainted from that whole process. It was such a disaster for them that upper management said, hey, you know what, pen and paper has served us fine. They lost focus on what they were trying to do to begin with. They got burned, and hey, let's just go back to the old way, and that's clearly the best thing for them to do. That's what they believed. So anyway, you want to avoid making decisions based on price and price alone. There's other considerations to think about as well. Do you own your data? How much data do you have access to, and things like that. Again, these are all based on the getting back to the cloud-based solutions. All right, my second bullet on there, don't rely entirely on the vendor for success. I've seen that before. We've seen that before. People that say, hey, I bought a WMS, I've written you the check, now you go make it work. Well, that's fantastic if you're paying someone to come in and run your operations for you. But that's not what you're doing. At the end of the day, you're buying a solution, and you need your people to be able to make it work, because at the end of the implementation, people, they leave, they get on a plane, they go home, whatever, and you're left with, this fancy new piece of software. So you can't just rely on the vendor to do everything. You want to make sure that you and your project team, people need to have, skin in the game, right? Things don't run on autopilot either. So getting back to that idea, that warehouse champion, and you guys having skin in the game, who's leading the charge in this whole thing, who's going to get credit for the success, and who's going down with the ship if it's not successful. Another don't have unreasonable expectations. There's a number of ways that you can take this, but again, not underestimating the time. How long a project is going to take. Now, I did mention things need to progress forward, and typically we would, suggest to most of our new customers that most projects are, a 4 to 5 month window total. Some faster, a couple have gone longer than that, but you do not want that never-ending project. Certainly, what you don't want, we've heard it too many times. We need to be live in 30 days. We need to be live next week, and bad things happen when you rush to make things happen. So don't do that. If you needed this yesterday, then you probably should have bought it before yesterday. Don't underestimate the time and effort that you're going to need to invest on the training and the testing of things. This really gets back to that implementation plan, milestones, testing, running through different test scenarios, and so forth. The implementation team, your project manager, they're going to drill it in people's heads. Test, 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 and more testing. And we're talking about real-life examples that need to be tested. It's not enough, to have somebody go in and key in a couple sample orders, and then run through and pick, pack, and ship them. Yep, it works. Everything's fine. No, you need to actually run through real-life examples. That means a period of time where buyers are, entering in complicated purchase orders that somebody's got to receive, or customer service are entering in, regular orders, medium orders, and some really, really complex orders, right? Because it's in those special cases where you're going to exercise, those really unique situations that are going to validate you've got all your bases covered. Again, you'll never get 100% of it, but the more that you get up front in that testing and training period, the more likely you are that nothing like that is going to come up when you go live. When something does come up, then you're able to, react to it, and you've only got one or two, smaller things that come up as opposed to deal breakers, showstoppers, and so forth. All right, let's talk about, how to choose the right vendor. First and foremost, ask lots of questions. This is okay, right? This is actually expected. This isn't, or should not be DIY warehouse management, right? This should be a collaborative endeavor that you and, your vendor are going to be working on together. Be curious in this. When the vendor is recommending something, whether it's, one solution over another or one process over another, ask them about it. Right? Why are they recommending that? We talked about sharing your goals and why you're doing something like this. Do they understand those? Right? How deeply do they understand them? Ask questions about the software. Can it do this? Can it do this? Can it do that? Those types of things. I'm reminded of some of my teachers growing up. Right? There's no dumb questions. You hear that a lot. That's true. Even if there are dumb questions, there are no dumb questions. So make sure that you ask whatever's on your mind, because that's going to satisfy your curiosity. As you whittle your way through the list of providers, of vendors, and we suggest that you always look at least 3. Sometimes people open it up and they'll talk to a dozen different people, but you need to whittle it down to a short list. At least 3. And as you go through that process, you're asking them, certain questions, right? What do you, Mr. Vendor, what do you see as our biggest obstacle in, achieving our goals? What do you think we're doing right? Are there other things that, we need to be doing better? What do you think is going to happen tomorrow, right? Another way to say that is, what ought we be doing today, or what ought we be considering, on the horizon? What you're really trying to get at is, does the vendor get it? Do they get you? Do they get what your goal is? Do they get what your current situation is? Do they understand it enough that they possibly are actually telling you some other things that, hey, by the way, did you know that this is going on out on the warehouse, floor? Those types of things. Because the better they get it, the better they're going to help you, and the more that you're going to get out of this. Really the most important question that you're trying to get here in understand if they get it is, are you talking with somebody who wants to help you, grow your business? Are they more of a thought leader, or are they just trying to sell you software? As you dialogue with vendors, it should become pretty clear that you're dealing with that thought leader as you move forward. All right. Ask about the implementation process. Does it make sense? Do they have a track record? What's the philosophy they're following? This whole thing should make total success. What does the vendor recommend that you use? All right. I understand I'm running close on time, so I'll try to talk about a couple more topics real quick, and we'll get right to questions and answers. We talked about choosing the right vendor, choose the right software solution, some things to have at the top of the list. Make sure you're choosing something that's easy to learn. It's flexible. It does what you need it to do. There's a phrase out there, rules-based systems. These are things that allow you to, plug in how you want it to work, so it does work. And then as things change, those rules are changed, and you're able to adapt as the future comes. Future-proof, I talked about that earlier. It's really when the time comes and you need to make change. Wouldn't it be great if your software already does what you need it to do and you just have to turn it on? We've got some things, you know, are you looking at a solution that's customization, you know, that you can customize? Are there built-in ways to do that? Does the software have to be modified? Is the vendor going to do that? Are they willing to do it? Is it expensive? What happens in the future? Do you pay once? Do you pay twice? All those types of things. Gosh, do not forget customer service and support. How does that work with the vendor? What's the vendor's reputation? Are you paying for it? What are additional benefits that come along with that? These are all important questions and considerations that you'll want to ask. All right, some final thoughts. Just one thing we do at PathGuide, anytime we win a new account, we do an actual win evaluation. We have a third party reach out to new customers of ours and ask what it is that they felt we did right. Why did we win the business versus someone else? I've got some nice quotes up there. At the end of the day, when we hear that we're doing something that sets us apart from our competitors, it lets us know that we are doing something right. We place a huge importance on that, and so we continue to do that. When we hear something like this quote here, PathGuide went all in to do something, we know we've got the right people with the right attitudes, you know, helping people be successful. And when we continue to hear that, you know, customer service and support sets us apart, we know that we're doing something right. And, you know, that's definitely something, you know, that you want to ask. So with that, I'm ready to summarize. We talked about a number of do's. Basically, keep track of what your goals and objectives are. Make sure you get buy-in across the organization. Choose the best, you know, the right solution for some specific reasons. Create a plan and stick to the plan. Don't limit yourself to buying on price alone. Have skin in the game. Don't just rely on somebody else to make it work. Don't underestimate, you know, testing and training. Have some reasonable expectations. And with that, I'm ready to move to Q&A. Gary, would this be yourself?
Yep, or Eric. Eric should have it as well.
And yeah, I don't have any.
I
see no questions here.
All right, fantastic.
Okay,
well, with that, I've reached the end of my presentation. Again, it's my pleasure to be here again. I'm sorry if I went a little bit over there. This is actually something that I'm very passionate about. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy going in, hearing you know, what ails people, what keeps them up at night. I like talking about how we can help make things better, and above all, I love seeing that actually, you know, people actually be successful with that. I'll be in Orlando at TUG. I look forward to the opportunity. Feel free to stop by our booth, come up, say hi, ask any questions that you've got. I also have my contact information if you'd like to know more. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I look forward to that. Gary, back to you.
very good. That's pretty much it. It's a wrap. Thank you all for attending. Hope to see you at TUG. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.